One of the biggest mistakes that I see so many chess players make is that they move way too many pawns. And that's actually one of the main reasons why you are losing so many games. So in this video, I will show you a different way of playing chess. And what I will be doing to demonstrate this is I will be restricting myself to only, or at least mostly, using the E pawn, the D pawn, and the C pawn, because these are the pawns that we should focus on for most of this game. The other ones, in most games, you don't need to touch them unless if you have a very good reason to do so. And I will be teaching you a new strategy using this rule, trying to avoid using many pawns. And then also I will teach you some middle game strategies as well. So first of all, opening wise, what we will be doing is we will just create this triangle shape. And this is what I always play with black. I always just create this triangle. And you might be thinking, like, why are these E pawn, D pawn, and C pawn, why are these the important pawns? Well, it's because these influence the center, and moving these pawns always helps to improve your pieces. This helps to open up diagonals. This helps to fight for the center, maybe open up a file. It helps to open up for the queen. All of the other pawns, when you move them, you are mostly creating weaknesses. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but that's just the basic rule we want to follow here. So I am just going to continue my development like this. All right. And they take my pawn here on d5. This is a very important moment. Most people never think about how to recapture here, which ends up with them going completely wrong. But there is actually a recapture here that is better than everything else. And to understand this, we need to understand pawn structure. All right. So we have multiple possibilities. We could think about taking with the knight. We could think about taking with the E pawn, or we could think about taking with the C pawn. So which one is best? If you face a situation similar to this one, how can you know which one you should play? Well, I will teach you that. It basically all comes down to pawn structure. So let's have a look. So imagine, first of all, if we take with the knight, that would not be a great move. That would not be a great move. Because if they take our bishop, and let's say we take with the queen, they could play the move pawn to e4, which is going to win a tempo against our knight, meaning that they attack our knight. We can then capture their knight, but what we have achieved is that we have given white a very strong central pawn structure, and they were also able to win a move by attacking our knight. So that is not what we want to play here. All right. So the main rule is don't recapture with a piece if they can win a tempo on that piece, which is true here for the knight. Sometimes you can also take it with the queen, and then they could also win a tempo on the queen. So we won't be recapturing with the knight. So we need to make a pawn recapture. If we capture this way, we are literally creating a completely symmetrical pawn structure. This is just identical for both sides. If we take with the other pawn, we have an imbalanced pawn structure, meaning that it's different for both sides. So what's best, creating a similar pawn structure or creating a different pawn structure? Well, if we choose to do this and we choose to create a very similar pawn structure, then what's going to be the actual difference in this position? Well, there will be some differences. First of all, their bishop has been developed outside of the pawn chain. It has been developed before this pawn was pushed. On our side, this bishop is stuck within the pawn chain. So that's already one benefit for white. It's also white to move. White goes first. So white will be the first to use this open file, and we will be struggling to activate pieces. So as black, you usually don't want to create a symmetrical pawn structure because white has the extra move, so you will always be down behind one move basically. Plus here they also have the developed bishop. So taking all of that into account, that is how we can know that this capture is actually the capture that we would like to play. Plus, this is also the capture that opens up a diagonal for our bishop. So this is what we want. And now we can just castle and play a middle game. All right. And this is usually the moment where people start pushing pawns because they run out of ideas. They don't have a plan for the middle game. So they just start pushing pawns. But instead, I will teach you a simple strategy that you can use for your middle game. So what I always use in every game is the CCTO strategy, which helps me to find strong moves time and time again without needing to rely on intuition. So CCTO stands for check, capture, threat, optimize, and that is the order in which we need to evaluate different moves. So we don't have checks, we don't have captures, and a threat would be something like this, attacking an unprotected pawn. That would be a threat. But if it's a simple one-move threat that they can easily solve, then we won't be playing it. So we don't have a check, capture, or a threat, which means we need to optimize. And when we want to optimize, we want to think about improving our pieces. That's what we want, especially those pieces on the back rank. Or we could also move a pawn, but it should be an ED or C pawn move, or a very key pawn move that really improves the position, which most of the time there is not any pawn move that's very useful except these three. So how could we try to do something here? Well, maybe knight h5 could be an interesting move. This, first of all, threatens to double the pawns, and it also opens up a square for the other knight to go to in the future. They ignore this, which basically means that we can just capture this, and this has now doubled their pawns. And we already have a strategic advantage at this point. Why? Well, it all comes down to pawn islands. You need to start thinking about this in your game. I want to change the way you look at pawns. We have two pawn islands. We have the red pawn island, they are all connected, and then we have the blue pawn island. That's perfect. We only have two pawn islands. They have this red pawn island. This is their blue pawn island. I know that they are not connected, but they can be connected. So that's also one island. And then they have this isolated pawn. This pawn is all by itself, this orange one. And in chess, you always want to have the minimal amount of pawn islands that you can, which for us here, that's two. While they have three pawn islands, that's great. That's a benefit for us. Because the player with more pawn islands will always struggle to defend that orange pawn in this case. And that's the one that they might lose, and that might lose them the game as well. If you can give them four pawn islands, that's usually just game over. Three pawn islands, they can try to defend still. So that's the first strategy. We always want to keep using this CCTO. So check, capture, threat, optimize. Most of the time, especially early in the game, it's just check, capture, threat doesn't work. We need to optimize, optimize, optimize. But at some point, they might blunder something, and then check, capture, threat will reveal a solution. So rook on this open file attacks the bishop, not really doing anything. So let's just optimize. Let's get this bishop into the game. All right, and they capture. So they give us the option, if we want, to trade a bishop for a knight. We always need to think carefully about this. Do we want to trade a bishop for a knight? Usually you don't want to trade a bishop for a knight. In this case, we have a lot of pawns on the light squares, and our light squared bishop was actually one of our worst pieces. Very difficult to get into the game. We could either try to keep it and see if we will open up the position, or we could trade it and try to keep the position closed. Basically keep these pawns on the light squares. Now, we don't have a light squared bishop anymore. We have a dark squared bishop. And because of the light squared pawns, this dark squared bishop and the dark squared queen, these have very strong diagonals that we can use. Our opponent is left with a light squared bishop, and because we have all these light squared pawns, this bishop is a pretty useless piece. It basically has this square and that's like about it. Other than that, that bishop is pretty much trapped. Doesn't really have many good squares. So this already shows us that by understanding pawn structure, we will be able to find better moves in our game. And you might be thinking right now, like, wow, I already learned so much. I learned about pawn islands, these isolated pawns, then the trade of that bishop knight. And there are probably many, many more things just like this that you don't know yet. And if you want to figure out what it is that you don't know, then you can always book a free coaching session with me. You can go to pegasuschess.com. You can have a chat with me. I will look at some of your games and I will try to figure out what it is that you need to do to improve. And I always do this by looking at your games. Because when I look at your games, I will be able to see what it is exactly that you don't know yet. Because there are many other strategies than the one I'm showing here. So if you want that, you can go to pegasuschess.com. But let's continue with the video. So as I said, I will be trying to minimize the amount of pawn moves that I make. I will be focusing on pieces. So let's just put the rook here. I mean, they have a rook on the open file. We can have a rook on the open file. But my bishop is in the way, so maybe we move the bishop, and then at least our rooks are facing off with each other. And all of these moves look incredibly simple, but it's because they are incredibly simple. It's really not that difficult to play this well. All we really wanted to do is we wanted to get that advantageous pawn structure, and then we will try to turn this into an endgame win. So I want to get my rook into the game, to this file. That's really what I want. So I will be moving my queen, because I want to slide this rook over here. They are playing pawn g5, which attacks the knight. Knight has to move. We don't have that many squares. If we go to e4, we will probably be losing a pawn. So we might have to go to e8 and do some maneuvering with this knight. What's going on with this rook c1? I don't think it's doing anything. Let's just maneuver this knight. All right. And I want to either get knight e6, that would be a huge improvement, or I want to get rook to e8. Which one should we play? Well, I think knight e6 is a genius move, because knight e6 attacks both this pawn and that pawn at the same time, and those are basically two hanging pawns at the same time. And this is the moment where we are starting to see that because white misplayed their pawns. Basically, look at white. White made all of the pawn moves. I barely moved pawns. I still have this very simple, very safe structure from the beginning of the game. And white is just pushing pawns all over the board. And this is why they are losing. This is why you are losing in your games. Because you are doing similar things, just pushing your pawns all over the board. And now they have this weakness, this weakness, this weakness, this weakness. And something will collapse. They are trying to be sneaky, see if they can like get in with the queen or with the bishop. And this is one of those moments, yes. This is a very crucial position. Here it is fine to play that move pawn to g6, because at least by playing this move, we prevented a possible checkmate threat. That's an example of when it is okay, because it's very important. We need to move that pawn. If not, I wouldn't have moved it, and I would have just kept going exactly like I was doing. This queen g4 move is very smart, because if I go and I try to pick up one of those three pawns, I'm always dropping my queen. So basically, we cannot do that right away. Okay. Yeah, what can we do? I think what I could try to do is activate my rook, protect my queen, and then I have the option of snatching one of those three pawns. So I think that makes sense. It basically solves our problem. And I'm trying to see if we can take one of those pawns. F5 is probably a pretty smart move by them. Because I cannot capture this pawn the queen would be capturing. And by moving, they also removed this pawn. But it's okay. We are just going to move the knight. And this actually sets up a new threat. We had three attackers at the same time on a pawn that had only two defenders. But what's going on here? So they take here, but that means that they allow us to do this, which we are giving them the legendary tripled pawns. Like the moment your opponent has tripled pawns, you pretty much know that they are doing something wrong with the pawn structure in this game. This is a beautiful example of that. How should we capture here? F pawn or H pawn? The answer is that we want to capture towards the center. In general, rook pawns, meaning pawns that start on the same file as the rook, those are the most useless pawns. If you have like one extra pawn at the end of the game and it's one of those rook pawns, that's just going to be a draw in most cases. So by capturing this way, we change one of our rook pawns into a knight pawn. So that's fine. That's already an improvement. And look at this. We still have the two pawn islands, just like we talked about in the beginning. And then, like, what does white have over here? They have this, they have this. Maybe you could say this is one pawn island for them, these three, but it's pretty messed up. It's all over the place. And we can just play knight e6. It took us quite a while, but finally, we are attacking both of these pawns at the same time. And I think that's just it. We finally, I think it's move 28, we win our first pawn. That is exactly what we wanted to happen. And now we are going to try to finish off this game. The good thing is also we didn't just win a pawn. We also still have the superior structure because we still have better pawn islands and they still have that isolated pawn. And that is really what I wanted you to remember mostly from this game. That it is so incredibly important to start thinking about your pawn islands. Almost nobody ever thinks about this, but you need to start thinking about pawn islands and about not pushing that many pawns because it really makes things easier for you. So I have to move this knight. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I could give this check. The only thing is, we have an opposite color bishop situation. They have a light colored bishop. I have a dark colored bishop. Like, if I trade rooks here, this is going to be a draw. I won't win with one extra pawn if we have opposite colored bishops. So I would actually like to capture that bishop with my knight instead of trading knight. So I won't be doing that. I think maybe g5 makes sense. We could go to e4 or c7, but I see no future. So I think g5 probably makes sense. All right. This is also an interesting one. We could take this. That avoids the opposite colored bishop endgame, but we are giving them a bishop versus knight endgame. And in the endgame, the bishop is a little bit stronger than the knight because it's very fast. It can control both sides of the board at the same time. The knight is very slow. So we would really like to trade this for this. That's the trade that we want to make. So how can we do this? Let's see if we can start by getting rooks off the board. Like, getting rooks off the board is fine. That would probably even help us with winning chances. Let's see. I think this pawn is also vulnerable, by the way. We could also try to win this one. We could also try to win this one. Let's have a look at some lines. So first thing I was thinking about is the rook trade. Like, if they take this, that's just a free win. That's a free win because with rooks off the board, we are just winning this endgame. We have one extra pawn. But I do think they might be going here, and then all of a sudden, we are almost back rank mated. So this doesn't really look great. We don't want to fall for that. Knight e6 could probably work, trying to see if we could win that pawn. I think that could be interesting. This trade, I didn't really like this trade, but if we play this trade, we could go after that pawn, and they don't have a way to defend it. So probably we can actually do this trade, and then we can end up with a free pawn. So it's only because I have this free pawn, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this trade. And we actually still have to watch out for this checkmate, but I think we can just run over here and we will probably be fine. They can protect it like this. That's actually very smart. That's very smart. Okay, but it's okay. We are still doing fine. I'll just need to watch out. We don't want to lose a pawn. And we still want to trade that knight for bishop. Yeah, that's fine. Like, if you want to trade knight for bishop, we can. No, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Okay. Because now we just have an endgame where we have an extra pawn. 2 extra pawns, so this should be an easy win. I'm still going to play this out a little bit more because I know that so many of you always comment that I should start playing out my games because I always say, oh, this is an easy win. There's no way to go wrong. Yeah, many of you go wrong. But what we basically want to do is we just want to pick up as many pawns as we can for free. If we can trade rooks, I will trade rooks. So let's just see if they want to do that. Okay, they don't. And if they don't want to trade rooks, then we will just be pushing our passed pawn. That's really what we want. We want to push the passed pawn. I'll be putting my rook here because basically I can create this type of fortress where I don't have a single weakness. And in the endgame, there's only one rule you have to remember, which is PPP. Push past pawn. That's the endgame rule we need. Push past pawn. Just push it. Just push it. We can ignore everything. Just push it. I'm not even looking at what they are doing. We push it. Doesn't matter. The PPP rule always works. Well, yeah, maybe I will take this. But you could even just push. Like, literally, PPP works all the time. Yeah, they are just going crazy because it's completely losing for them anyways. But this is the endgame rule you need. PPP, just keep pushing that pawn. And then from here, this should be a very easy checkmate. So please try out this strategy and leave a comment to let me know how it went.